July 24th, 1944, dawn broke over Tinian, a verdant island jewel in the vast expanse of the Pacific, yet one that had been meticulously transformed into a bristling, uncompromising fortress. For the Imperial Japanese forces, this was no mere outpost. It was a crucial strategic linchpin, an unsinkable aircraft carrier guarding the approaches to the home islands, and a testament to their unwavering will. Its keeper, Colonel Kiyochi Ogata, commander of the 50th Infantry Regiment, surveyed his domain with a calm, almost serene confidence. His men had poured years of sweat and blood into fortifying Tinian, turning its natural ruggedness into an intricate web of death. Ogata knew the Americans would come. They had already clawed their way onto Saipan, a mere 3 miles across the strait, after a brutal, protracted fight. But Tinian, he believed, would be different. It was smaller, yes, but infinitely more defensible. The island's southern half was dominated by the Ushi Point Airfield, a vital facility that the Americans desperately coveted for their B-29 Superfortress bombers. Yet, Ogata was convinced it was beyond their immediate reach. The approaches to Ushi Point were a nightmare of his own design. Reinforced concrete pillboxes, hidden artillery positions, carefully sited machine gun nests, all burrowed into the coral rock, creating an interlocking kill zone. Even the beaches, though relatively flat, were fringed with reefs and subject to a devastating crossfire. But it wasn't just the initial defense that fueled Ogata's unshakable conviction. It was the follow-up. He understood the American imperative for speed, their relentless drive to establish air superiority and bring their heavy bombers to bear. He knew they would target Ushi Point, but he had a plan for that too. His engineers had prepared the airfield for methodical destruction, ensuring that its runways, even if captured, would be reared utterly unusable. His boast articulated to his staff and disseminated amongst his troops was clear and resounding. Even if the Americans take this airfield, he declared, his voice resonating with authority, it will take them no less than 3 to 6 months to repair it sufficiently for heavy bomber operations. By then, the war's tide will have turned, and our forces will be ready to push them back into the sea. This wasn't mere bluster. It was a calculated assessment based on conventional engineering wisdom, on the sheer scale of damage he planned to inflict, and on the known limitations of military construction in a combat zone. He envisioned craters so vast, rubble so extensive, and a landscape so utterly torn apart that only a monumental, time-consuming effort could ever restore it. He factored in the constant harassment from remaining Japanese pockets of resistance, the logistical nightmares of bringing in heavy equipment, and the sheer audacity of expecting an immediate operational base from a shattered airstrip. Tinian, in Ogata's mind, was not just deef. It was designed to deny the enemy its most precious prize, long after the last bullet had been fired. The wait, he was sure, would be agonizingly long for the Americans and decisively advantageous for Japan. The Japanese on Tinian had transformed the island into a layered death trap, a testament to their unwavering dedication and their unique engineering philosophy. For months, under Ogata's meticulous supervision, thousands of Japanese soldiers and impressed Korean laborers had carved out a subterranean labyrinth. Natural caves were reinforced with concrete and steel, forming command posts and supply depots impervious to all but the most direct hits. Pillboxes, often camouflaged with local vegetation, sprouted from the volcanic rock, providing interlocking fields of fire that could sweep every beach and key inland approach. Anti-tank ditches, carefully concealed and strategically placed, crisscrossed potential invasion routes, designed to channel American armor into killing zones. Every inch of Tinian was a fortress. The Japanese engineers, lacking the heavy earth-moving equipment that defined their American counterparts, relied instead on sheer manual labor, picks, shovels, and the back-breaking work of countless men. They hauled rocks, mixed concrete by hand, and dug miles of tunnels through the unforgiving coral. This painstaking, resource-intensive approach meant that every fortification was deeply personal, a product of immense sacrifice and collective will. Ogata had walked every square mile, envisioning American landings, anticipating their movements, and designing a defensive grid that he believed was impregnable, or, at the very least, would exact a horrifying toll in blood and time. He saw the island not just as a defensive stronghold, but as a strategic time sink, a place where American ambition would bleed dry trying to secure a functional airbase. The existing bombed-out airstrips were merely bait, leading the enemy into a protracted struggle that would exhaust their resources and morale. What Ogata and his engineers could not factor into their calculations, however, was the sheer, overwhelming might of American industrial capacity and the innovative spirit of the United States Naval Construction Battalions, better known as the Seabees. These were not just soldiers. They were highly skilled engineers, craftsmen, heavy equipment operators, and builders equipped with an arsenal of machinery unparalleled in history. While Japanese engineers meticulously dug tunnels with hand tools, the Seabees wielded bulldozers, graders, power shovels, and rock crushers that could transform landscapes in a matter of hours, not months. Their motto, "We build, we fight," underscored a pragmatic ingenuity that combined frontline combat with unprecedented construction capability. The American invasion of Tinian, following the brutal struggle for Saipan, presented the Seabees with a monumental challenge. The existing airfields, as Ogata had correctly surmised, were indeed heavily damaged and surrounded by formidable Japanese defenses. Yet, the American planners, rather than attempting to reclaim and repair these obvious targets, began to look beyond them. Aerial reconnaissance had revealed a more promising site on the island's southern plateau, a vast, relatively flat expanse of coral rock. It was a blank slate, offering the potential for multiple parallel runways, far superior to anything the Japanese had envisioned or constructed. This decision was a profound miscalculation on Ogata's part. He had focused on denying the enemy his existing airfields, not on the possibility that the Americans would simply create entirely new ones from raw terrain. The scale of the Seabees' ambition was staggering. They weren't just going to patch up a single runway. They planned to build a massive airbase complex featuring 4 parallel 8,500-foot runways capable of launching hundreds of heavy bombers. It was an undertaking that, by Japanese engineering standards, would have taken years of manual labor, an impossible feat under constant enemy harassment. But the Seabees had no intention of taking years. Fresh from their triumphs on Saipan, where they had rapidly repaired airfields under fire, they arrived on Tinian with an almost aggressive confidence in their ability to shape the battlefield to their will. As the fighting continued to rage in pockets across the island, and the jungle concealed the remaining Japanese resistance, the Seabees set to work. Their first task was to carve out access roads through the dense, unforgiving terrain, bringing in their colossal machinery. The roar of diesel engines, the grinding of gears, and the incessant clang of steel against rock became the new, unwelcome soundtrack to Ogata's rapidly diminishing confidence. With incredible speed, they began clearing the designated plateau. Bulldozers, operating around the clock, tore through vegetation and leveled the ground. Giant power shovels scooped out coral aggregate, feeding it into portable rock crushers that churned out thousands of tons of ready-to-lay runway material. This was engineering on an industrial scale, a stark contrast to the patient, laborious methods of the Japanese. The Americans weren't just building, they were transforming the very landscape of Tinian, demonstrating a technological and logistical superiority that must have seemed utterly alien and terrifying to the entrenched Japanese defers. Each day saw tangible, visible progress, a relentless march of construction that mocked every assumption Ogata had made about the timeline of the American advance and their ability to establish air superiority. The wait, he had thought, would be agonizingly long for the Americans. Instead, it was proving agonizingly swift. July 24th, 1944, just before dawn, on the north shores of Tinian. The island, shrouded in a pre-dawn haze, had lurid days of relentless naval bombardment and aerial strafing. What was once lush green landscape had been pulverized into a mosaic of churned earth, shattered trees, and the twisted wreckage of Japanese defenses. As the first light touched the horizon, it revealed the grim aftermath and, more importantly, the vanguard of an invasion force unlike any the Pacific had yet seen. The initial waves of Marines, emerging from their landing vehicle tracked LVT amphibians, stormed the designated beaches, White 1 and White 2. Under the cover of a smokescreen, they met with immediate, though somewhat muted, resistance from the stunned and disoriented Japanese defers. The roar of naval guns still echoed, but it was quickly joined by the staccato rhythm of machine gun fire and the sharp crack of rifles as the Marines established their precarious toehold. Their objective was clear: secure a beachhead, push inland, and take the island. But hot on their heels, a different kind of warrior, with a different kind of weapon, was already churning ashore. These were the United States Navy construction battalions, the Seabees. Their uniform might have been the same as the combat Marines and soldiers, but their tools of war were vastly different. Not M1 Garands and grenades, but colossal D8 bulldozers, heavy road graders, towering crane shovels, and gargantuan earth movers. These machines, weighing tens of thousands of pounds, rumbled off the landing craft, their treads biting into the rubble-strewn sand and broken coral. The kapani of battle was now augmented by the deep, throaty roar of powerful diesel engines, a sound that must have been utterly alien and terrifying to the entrenched Japanese. Even as Japanese sniper fire occasionally zinged past and mortar shells still thudded haphazardly near the beach, the Seabees went to work. They were engineers first, fighters second, but always ready for both. Their immediate task was not to kill the enemy, but to tame the land itself. They began a methodical, relentless assault on the very terrain. Shattered palms were pushed aside like matchsticks. Deep shell craters, pockmarking the beach and the immediate inland area, were filled in with astonishing speed. Rubble, debris, and the remnants of fortifications were systematically cleared, creating pathways where only obstacles had existed moments before. For Major General Ogata and his remaining forces, observing from their shattered positions, this must have been a profoundly unsettling spectacle. They had prepared for a bloody, protracted infantry battle, a grinding attrition of man against man, pillbox against tank. But what they were witnessing was a demonstration of overwhelming industrial might. A force that didn't just fight for ground, but actively reshaped it to its will. The Americans weren't simply landing, they were building an advanced base from the moment their boots touched the sand. Within hours, not days, rudimentary supply roads began to stretch inland from the beaches, wide enough and firm enough to support the heavy trucks and armored vehicles now pouring ashore. Landing zones were expanded, reinforced, and made secure, preparing for the incessant flow of men and material that would follow. The Seabees worked around the clock, their powerful floodlights piercing the tropical night, illuminating scenes of frantic, tireless construction. Each scraped path, each filled crater, each leveled expanse was a visible, tangible step toward transforming Tinian into a forward operating base. Ogata's boast of impregnable defenses, his confident assumption that the American advance would be slow and agonizing, was being mocked by the furious pace of construction. The wait he had expected the Americans to endure was not agonizingly long for them. It was proving agonizingly swift for his own rapidly diminishing forces. The island was not just being invaded, it was being utterly transformed, becoming a springboard from which America's strategic bombers would soon launch their devastating attacks directly against the Japanese home islands. A grim legacy for an island once thought unconquerable. February 12, 1944. On the island's contested main airfield, The ground vibrated with a rhythm entirely alien to its tropical stillness, a cadence of steel and raw power orchestrated by the United States Navy Seabees. It wasn't merely construction, it was a desperate, high-stakes race against time, against the elements, and against an enemy still dug in, watching from jungle perimeters. The cratered, shell-shocked landscape, a testament to relentless bombardment, offered little welcome. What remained of the Japanese airfield was a ruin. A tangled mess of splintered trees and bomb craters, larger than houses, a site designed by nature and war to defy any quick revival. But the Seabees, these sailors who built and fought, arrived with a spirit as unyielding as the heavy equipment they brought ashore. Their motto, "We build, we fight," was not a mere slogan, it was a lived reality. They worked around the clock, under the relentless glare of the Pacific sun by day, and under floodlights or the sporadic flicker of muzzle flashes by night. Bulldozers, graders, and steamrollers moved with an almost frantic energy, their engines roaring a symphony of determination. Men, many of them experienced construction workers, engineers, and tradesmen from civilian life, now clad in fatigues, drove themselves to exhaustion. They operated heavy machinery with a precision born of necessity, pushing coral and volcanic ash into gaping craters, leveling runway sections, and carving out new taxiways where jungle had stood mere hours before. The challenge was immense. Not only did they have to conk with a devastated landscape, but also with enemy sniper fire that crackled intermittently from the dense foliage, and the distant, unsettling thud of Japanese artillery attempting to disrupt their progress. Yet they pressed on. While some Seabees laid down perforated steel planking over newly graded surfaces, creating a temporary but robust runway, others were stringing communication lines, establishing field hospitals, and constructing rudimentary barracks and mess halls. Fuel depots were established, vital for the incoming waves of aircraft. It was an ecosystem of organized chaos, each team interdependent, each man pushing his limits to meet an impossible deadline. They transformed wreckage into readiness, with an ingenuity that often bordered on the miraculous, improvising solutions for every unforeseen obstacle the island threw at them. In a matter of days, what the Japanese commander had believed would take weeks, if not months, began to take shape. The temporary steel matting stretched for thousands of feet, gleaming under the sun. Control towers, quickly erected from salvaged materials, began to chatter with radio traffic, and then, the ultimate symbol of their achievement, the first American transport plane, followed by fighter escorts, touched down, sing cheers rippling across the worksite. Soon the heavy bombers would follow, their massive frames symbolizing the inevitable retribution that was to come. The airfield, battered and scarred, was operational. It was a tangible manifestation of American industrial might, strategic foresight, and the raw, unyielding grit of individual men. The Japanese High Command, watching from afar and receiving reports from their dwindling forces, could scarcely comprehend the speed. Their meticulously planned defenses, their calculated delays, all crumbled before this relentless, almost inhuman pace of construction. The island, once a formidable fortress, was now a launching pad, its rapid transformation a stark testament to a different kind of warfare, one where the builder was as crucial as the fighter, where logistical superiority and engineering prowess became decisive weapons. The Seabees, with their unique blow of construction skill and combat readiness, weren't just building airfields, they were building bridges to victory, shortening distances, and accelerating the inevitable of the war. Their legacy is etched not just in the steel and coral of countless Pacific bases, but in the unwavering belief that no task is too great, no obstacle insurmountable, when purpose is clear, and the spirit can do. This spirit transformed the very calculus of war, proving that against such determined ingenuity, even the most boastful defenses were destined to fall not just to bombs and bullets, but to the unstoppable force of collective will and a relentless drive to build a path to peace. February 12, 1944, Dawn over the newly christened airfield echoed with an unfamiliar, terrifying sound for the Japanese defers still clinging to the island's interior. The deep, resonant thrum of multiple aircraft engines, a sound that had been utterly impossible just weeks prior, now vibrated through the very coral and soil of their fortified positions. Out of the rising sun, the first flights of American Corsairs and dauntless dive bombers clawed into the morning sky, their wings glinting, their purpose unmistakable. This was not a distant raid from a carrier group. This was a direct assault, launched from the very ground Commander Tanaka had declared impregnable, impossible for any significant airfield construction. Tanaka, peering through his field glasses from a command bunker overlooking the coastal plain, felt a cold dread creep into his stomach, tighter than any fear of battle. His intelligence officers had reported increasing American activity, unusual noise, but he had dismissed it. His engineers, his geologists, his own seasoned eye had confirmed it. The terrain was too rugged, the marshland too soft, the time too short. He had boasted to his superiors, assured his men that the Americans might land, but they would never establish air dominance from this island. The sheer audacity of the enemy, their contempt for natural barriers, now soared visibly above him. Each roaring engine was a personal refutation, a brutal mocking of his strategic pronouncements. His face, usually a mask of stern resolve, twisted with a disbelief that bordered on physical pain. It wasn't just an airfield. It was an insult, a demonstration of an enemy capability he had fundamentally misjudged. Within hours, the impossible became routine. Waves of American aircraft, fueled and rearmed on Tanaka's impossible airfield, began hammering Japanese positions across the island and beyond. Previously, these sorties required long, vulnerable flights from distant carriers or other islands, limiting their duration and effectiveness. Now they were on the doorstep. Close air support became a continuous, devastating reality for the Japanese infantry, who suddenly found themselves fighting not just against ground troops, but under a relentless canopy of steel and fire from above. Supply lines, once relatively safe from sporadic air attacks, were now routinely interdicted, strafed, and bombed. Troop movements, once conducted under the cover of what they thought was unchallenged night, were now illuminated by flares and struck with terrifying precision. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. The Japanese forces, already stretched and often undersupplied, had relied heavily on their commanders' assurances of defensive strength. Tanaka's pronouncements had been a cornerstone of their morale. To see those very pronouncements so utterly, so brazenly, destroyed by an airfield that shouldn't exist, shattered that confidence. Doubt spread like wildfire. If the Americans could build an airfield overnight on impossible terrain, what else could they do? What other miracles of engineering and brute force did they possess? The Fortress Island narrative collapsed, replaced by a grim recognition that American ingenuity and industrial might could literally reshape the battlefield beneath their feet. The turning tide was palpable. The operational range of American fighters and bombers expanded dramatically, enabling them to strike deeper into Japanese-held territory, disrupt shipping lanes that had supplied other garrisons, and provide overwhelming air superiority for subsequent landings on neighboring islands. This single airfield, conceived in a spirit of daring and executed by the relentless will of the Seabees, transformed a tactical foothold into a strategic launching pad. It wasn't merely about more bombs dropped or more bullets fired. It was about demonstrating an entirely new dimension of warfare, one where the speed of construction and the flexibility of engineering could dictate the pace and direction of an entire campaign. Commander Tanaka's island, once boasted as an impenetrable bastion, became a stark monument to his miscalculation. His initial contempt for American engineering prowess had blinded him to a fundamental truth of the Pacific War, that the battle for islands was often won, not just by firepower, but by the relentless, often unglamorous work of men with bulldozers and dynamite. The legacy of that impossible airfield extends far beyond the coral runway itself. It represents the profound shift in the calculus of modern war. a testament to the belief that with unwavering purpose and an indomitable can-do spirit, even the most formidable natural barriers can be overcome, forging paths to victory through sheer will and ingenuity. It is a poignant reminder that while war destroys, it also forces extraordinary feats of creation, shaping the world in unexpected and enduring ways, forever altering the landscape of battle and the very definition of what is possible. From the ashes and the coral dust, the U.S. Navy Seabees rose as the unseen architects of victory, their hammers and bulldozers as potent as any weapon. Their ability to deliver infrastructure at an unprecedented pace was not merely a logistical marvel. It was a strategic weapon that fundamentally reshaped the Pacific War. With each airstrip carved from a jungle, each port dredged from a lagoon, each hospital erected under fire, they compressed time, denied the enemy respite, and projected American power across vast, unforgiving expanses. Islands once considered impregnable fortresses, designed to bleed an invading force dry, found their defenses circumvented by the very ground beneath them, transformed overnight into launching pads for further offensives. The boastful Japanese commander, confident in his island's natural defenses, had underestimated not just American firepower, but American ingenuity, American speed, and the sheer, unyielding will to build what others deemed impossible. This spirit, the unwavering can-do ethos, was born of necessity but forged into an enduring identity. It was a philosophy that embraced every challenge, whether it was building roads through swamps, constructing entire cities from scratch, or repairing damaged facilities under direct enemy fire. It was a promise that no obstacle, natural or man-made, would halt progress. This audacity, this relentless drive to innovate and overcome, instilled a deep confidence within the Allied forces and, conversely, sowed a paralyzing demoralization among the enemy. They faced not just soldiers but an entire industrial force unleashed, capable of turning the very terrain against them. The Seabees didn't just support the fighting, they created the conditions for it, enabling the island-hopping strategy to succeed where conventional, slower approaches would have faltered, costing countless more lives and extending the conflict indefinitely. The Seabees' legacy extends far beyond the battlefields of World War II. Their groundbreaking methods, their rapid deployment of heavy equipment, their ability to adapt and improvise in the most hostile environments set new benchmarks for military engineering worldwide. But perhaps more profoundly, they embedded their can-do spirit into the fabric of American national identity. They became a symbol of American resourcefulness, a testament to the belief that with determination, skill, and collective effort, any challenge could be met and conquered. This spirit resonates in every ambitious construction project, every rapid response to disaster, every endeavor that requires grit and ingenuity to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. It is the core of America's problem-solving ethos, an indelible mark of confidence that even the most daunting tasks can be accomplished with enough will and innovation. Their work, often performed in the shadows of combat, without the glory of direct engagement, was the bedrock upon which victory was built. They were not just engineers, they were the embodiment of innovation under duress, the practical idealists who literally paved the way to peace. The lessons they taught about speed as a strategic advantage, about the power of an unshakable will, about the transformative potential of engineering, continue to shape military and civilian endeavors to this day. From global humanitarian missions to the construction of modern infrastructure, their commitment to service, their willingness to confront adversity head-on, continues to inspire new generations of builders and fighters alike, ensuring their unique legacy endures. As the echoes of their bulldozers fade into history, the legacy of the Seabees stands as a monumental tribute to human ingenuity, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of progress. They remind us that true strength lies not just in the ability to fight, but in the capacity to create, to adapt, and to build a better future, brick by brick, runway by runway, against all odds. Their spirit lives on, a testament to those who faced the impossible and simply got to work, forever proving that the only true limit is the one we place upon ourselves.